Let me start with something real. On February 8th, somewhere around 128 million people sat in front of their screens and watched Bad Bunny take over the Super Bowl halftime show. That number is not an exaggeration. That is more people than most countries even have. And when the smoke cleared and the lights came down and that last beat dropped, most of those 128 million people were left with their mouths open. Not because of the pyrotechnics or the celebrity cameos, but because something deeper had just happened. Something they might not have even been able to name right away. Bad Bunny did not just perform that night. He told a story about a people, a land, and a survival that most of the world had been taught to believe was already over. Welcome to Pop Showroom, where we bring you the stories behind the headlines. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that button right now, because this story goes deeper than anything you've seen in the mainstream media. The performance was loaded with cultural references. The visuals were stunning, layered with meaning, and the message threaded through every song was clear. Puerto Rico is here, Puerto Rico is alive, and Puerto Rico remembers where it came from. But to really understand what made that halftime show more than just entertainment, you have to go back, way back, past the music, past the politics, past the colonization, all the way back to the people who were there first. The Taíno people were the original inhabitants of what we now call Puerto Rico. They were part of the broader Arawak peoples, who came up from South America and spread themselves across the Caribbean over hundreds of years, settling on the islands that today carry the names Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Jamaica, and Puerto Rico. These were not small, scattered groups living in isolation. They had complex societies, spiritual practices, agricultural systems, and a rich tradition of passing down history through music, dance, and oral storytelling. They called this practice arretos, and it was as central to Taino life as breathing. You want to understand something, you sing about it. You want to remember something, you dance it. You want to pass it down to the next generation, you perform it. That was the way. Then, 1492 happened. Christopher Columbus and his ships arrived in the Caribbean, and the world the Taíno had built began to crack. Columbus first set foot on Puerto Rico in 1493, planting the Spanish flag and claiming territory that had been home to the Taíno for centuries. And what followed that arrival was not a story of cooperation or cultural exchange, it was a story of destruction. Spanish colonization brought forced labor, enslavement, and mass death. Diseases that Europeans carried, diseases the Taíno had never encountered, tore through communities at a pace that was almost impossible to comprehend. Entire villages wiped out. Children who had no immunity to smallpox buried before their parents. Elders who had spent lifetimes carrying the memory of their people gone in weeks. The Spanish held Puerto Rico as a colony for over 400 years, and during that time, they imported enslaved African people to the island to replace the Taíno labor force they had already destroyed. The mixing that followed between the surviving Taíno, the Spanish colonizers, and the enslaved Africans created something new, a mestizo population, a people who carried all three of those worlds inside their blood. Puerto Rico, as we know it today, was born in that collision. Then came 1898. The Spanish-American War ended, Spain lost, and Puerto Rico was handed over to the United States like a playing card in a game neither the Taíno nor their descendants were ever invited to join. And somewhere in all of this reshuffling of power and ownership, a story got told that was designed to erase a people. The story went like this: the Taíno are gone. They are extinct. They died out. They do not exist anymore. And for a long time, a lot of people believed that story because the American government had a system that made it easy to believe. That system is called blood quantum. Blood quantum is one of the most damaging ideas ever applied to indigenous identity. The basic concept is that to be recognized as indigenous, a person must be able to prove they have a certain percentage of pure indigenous blood. If you cannot prove that, according to the government, you are not really indigenous, you are something else. This system was never designed to protect indigenous peoples. It was designed to shrink them down until there was nothing left to acknowledge. And when it came to the Taíno, the centuries of mixing with Spanish colonizers and African peoples meant that nobody could meet that narrow, artificial threshold. So the government said, there is no full-blooded Taíno tribe, therefore the Taíno are extinct. Case closed, move on. But here is where the story gets interesting, because the Taíno did not get the memo. More than 60% of Puerto Ricans carry genetic markers for indigenous heritage. You read that right, more than 60%. The blood is there, the ancestry is real. You can trace it through DNA. But even setting the biology aside for a moment, because blood alone has never been the only measure of a people, what you cannot deny is the culture. The Taíno survived in the way that all people survive when their bodies are under threat, through what they pass down, through language, through food, through spiritual practice, and most powerfully, through music. This is where Bomba comes in, and this is where you start to understand what Bad Bunny was really doing on that Super Bowl stage. Bomba is a musical tradition that is uniquely Puerto Rican. It grew from the collision between the arretos of the Taíno and the drum-based call-and-response traditions that enslaved African peoples brought to them to the island. When those two worlds met, something new was created, something that carried both histories inside it simultaneously. Bomba is not just music, it's a living archive. Every time it is performed, it's a form of remembrance. The beats carry the memory of Africa. The storytelling structure carries the memory of the Taíno. The call and response keeps both communities present in the sound. Bad Bunny performed his song El Apagón at the Super Bowl, and if you knew what you were listening to, your whole body would have recognized it. El Apagón, which translates to The Blackout, is a political song about the chronic power outages that Puerto Ricans have endured for years, a crisis rooted in decades of neglect and exploitation. But beneath the political message, the song pulses with bomba rhythms. It's a song built on the same foundation as arretos, its oral history, its protest delivered through the exact same form that the Taíno used centuries ago to pass down their truth. When Bad Bunny performed that song in front of 128 million people, he was not just making a political statement about electricity, he was demonstrating in real time that the Taíno tradition of using music to carry community memory had never died. It had simply evolved. It had absorbed everything that came after colonization and kept moving. And later in the show, in his song DTMF, Bad Bunny actually says the word bomba out loud. He named it. He claimed it. In front of the whole world. This is why that performance mattered in ways that went beyond spectacle. Because today, in 2024, the United States government still refuses to officially recognize the Taíno as an indigenous group. Think about what that means. Despite the genetic evidence, despite the cultural continuity, despite the fact that over 96,000 Puerto Ricans identified themselves as indigenous in the 2020 U.S. Census, the government looks at all of that and says, not valid. The American definition of indigeneity is a gatekeeper definition. It is designed to exclude rather than include. It asks for purity in a world that colonization made impure on purpose. It demands proof of something that 5 centuries of forced assimilation were specifically designed to destroy. And then it uses the absence of that proof as justification for continued erasure. But erasure requires cooperation. It only works if people accept the story being told about them. And Puerto Ricans, for a long time, have been refusing to accept that story. The Taíno revival movement that has been growing on the island for decades is not nostalgia. It's not people pretending to be something they aren't. It's a reclamation. It's people looking at the history of what was done to their ancestors and saying, we are still here, we carry this is ours. And the broader Puerto Rican identity, which has always been defined by its complexity, by the way it holds Indigenous, African, and Spanish histories all at once, is itself a testament to the Taíno legacy. Puerto Rico is inherently multicultural. That is not an accident. That is the result of a people surviving everything that was thrown at them by absorbing it and transforming it rather than being destroyed by it.
Bad Bunny understood all of this when he walked onto that stage. He knew that the halftime show is the biggest platform American entertainment has to offer, and he used every second of it to say something that the US government has been trying not to hear. He said, "We are still here. The Taíno are still here. Our music carries their memory. Our culture is their survival." And 128 million people watched him say it. So the next time someone tells you that the Taíno are extinct, tell them what you know now. Tell them about the Ariitos. Tell them about the Bomba. Tell them about the 60%. Tell them about el Apagón. Tell them about the 96,000 people who looked at a census form and wrote down Indigenous anyway, even knowing the government would not count it. Tell them about the man from Puerto Rico who stood on the biggest stage in American sports and spent 13 minutes making sure the world remembered something it was never supposed to forget. Because survival does not always look like what people expect. Sometimes it looks like a halftime show, sometimes it sounds like a Bomba beat, and sometimes, if you are paying attention, you can hear 500 years of history inside a single song. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this situation, so please share your opinions in the comments. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated on this story.